Russia used phosphorus bullets in the city of Bakhmut after the warlord Wagner Yevgeny Prigozhin announced the withdrawal of troops. During a press conference at the Kyiv Press Center on the morning of Saturday, May 6, the Deputy Minister of Defense of Ukraine said, Russia is sending more troops from other fronts to Bakhmut in eastern Ukraine. This attempt may have been to fill the space for Wagner's army. However, Hanna Maliar said that Moscow wanted to capture the city in time for the May 9 victory holiday. The Russians are inclined towards symbolism and their important historical myth is May 9 and they really did aim to control Bakhmut before this date, Maliar said. We are now seeing them pulling the fighters from the entire line of attack elsewhere including the Wagner fighters, and moving them towards Bakhmut. She specifically noted that the Russian invaders shelled Bakhmut with phosphorus bullets. A similar situation occurred in Mariupol. When they can't do anything, phosphorus bullets will be fired. We continue to protect this city, but the situation over the next few days is extremely tense, she said. According to Deputy Minister Hanna Maliar, in the 24 hours of May 5, the armed forces of Ukraine repelled more than 30 waves of Russian attacks in 3 directions. Particularly in the city of Bakhmut, it is clear that the Russian paratroopers are demoralized. They lost 3 tanks, 7 armored vehicles, 16 artillery systems, 3 rocket launchers and 30 troop transport vehicles and fuel. 2. Commander Wagner blames Russian defense leaders for tens of thousands of casualties among mercenaries. The head of the private military company Wagner accused Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu and ordered the armed forces. General Valery Gerasimov was responsible for tens of thousands of dead and wounded fighters, and continued his campaign of criticism of the Russian military leadership. The dead and wounded, and that are tens of thousands, are in the conscience of those who did not supply us with ammunition, Wagner boss Yevgeny Prigozhin said in a video statement released Friday on Telegram, which named both officials by name. For the tens of thousands of people killed and injured, they will be held accountable to their mothers, wives, and children, and I guarantee that, he added. In the same video message, Prigozhin praised the former deputy defense minister, Mikhail Mizantsev, who he said had recently joined the Wagner Group as deputy commander. Earlier on Friday, Prigozhin announced that the Wagner Group would leave the besieged eastern Ukrainian city of Bakhmut on May 10, citing a lack of ammunition supplies that Prigozhin blamed on its military commander. Russia. 3. Prigozhin says nuclear threats make Russia look like clowns. This week's drone attack on the Kremlin has set the stage for Russian politicians to make threats to use nuclear weapons. However, guerrilla leader Wagner Yevgeny Prigozhin warned the Russians to be careful. The nuclear weapons threats appear to be backfired. Newsweek had a report titled Prigozhin says nuclear threats make Russia look like clowns, which means, Prigozhin says nuclear threats make Russia look like clowns. According to Wagner Group CEO, Yevgeny Prigozhin. On Wednesday, the Kremlin's press service said in a statement that the Ukrainian government tried to carry out a drone strike and an assassination against the president. Russia Vladimir Putin. The Kremlin said 2 drones had fallen on the grounds of the Kremlin, but did not cause any damage or casualties. Russia reserves the right to take countermeasures wherever and whenever it deems appropriate, the Kremlin added. Kyiv immediately denied any involvement. We are not attacking Putin or Moscow, we are fighting on our territory, replied Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Mikhailo Podolyak, an advisor to Zelensky's chief of staff, echoed Zelensky's words, adding on Twitter that Ukraine waged a defensive war and did not attack targets on the territory of the Russian Federation because this does not solve any military problems. After the incident, some Russian officials appeared to suggest using nuclear weapons against Ukraine. Vyacheslav Volodin, chairman of the Russian State Duma, wrote on Telegram that we will demand the use of weapons capable of stopping and destroying Ukraine. Dmitry Medvedev, the former Russian president and now vice chairman of Russia's Security Council, also wrote on Telegram that there is no other choice but to remove Zelensky and his team. Answering questions from the press on social media, Prigozhin said that, of course, using nuclear weapons in response to drones is impossible. Prigozhin said in a statement that Russia should prioritize being a leading power in drone development and respond with the drones themselves. Prigozhin added, "We look like clowns, threatening nuclear retaliation against children's drones." Newsweek has reached out to the Russian Defense Ministry for comment via email. Prigozhin heads the Wagner mercenary force, which plays a prominent role in Russian operations in Ukraine. As an influential ally of Putin, Prigozhin has openly been at odds with Russia's military command and defense ministry. In its statement, the Kremlin said it considered the incident a planned terrorist attack and an assassination attempt on the president, carried out before Victory Day and the May 9th parade, where foreign guests are expected to be present, along with others, and asserted that Putin was unharmed. Victory Day in Russia commemorates the Soviet Union's victory over Nazi Germany and is an important national holiday. On Thursday, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said Moscow was considering various types of responses, according to Russia's state news agency, TASS. Of course, I can't give you any details here, Peskov added. In any case, it can only be about well-thought-out steps that meet the interests of our country. However, the US-based Institute for the Study of War said on Wednesday that some indications are that the attack was conducted internally and deliberately orchestrated by the Russian authorities. It could be an attempt to bring home war to a domestic audience, the think tank added. 4. Former Russian Deputy Defense Minister accused of joining Wagner mercenary group. Former Russian Deputy Defense Minister Mikhail Mizintsev has joined the Wagner mercenary group as a deputy commander. Alexander Semenov posted 2 videos on Telegram showing Mizintsev wearing a Wagner-branded uniform and appearing to be touring the eastern Ukrainian city of Bakhmut. The Russian Defense Ministry announced on Sunday that it had made a leadership change and replaced Mizintsev, who is currently serving as Russia's Deputy Defense Minister in charge of logistics. He has been in the role since September 2022 and is known for his brutality during the siege of Mariupol, the site of some of the most infamous attacks. Partisan leader Wagner Yevgeny Prigozhin publicly confirmed that General Butcher Mizintsev had retired from the army, joined the Wagner army and served as his deputy. 5. Ukrainian defense officials think Wagner's claims about discrimination may be true. Russia is blocking the supply of artillery shells to the mercenary group. Andriy Yusov told CNN, "It is true that the Wagner Corporation is being discriminated against in the supply of artillery shells by Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu and the commander of the Russian Armed Forces, General Valery Gerasimov, blocking the supply. In general, the number of shells fired by the Russian army in Bakhmut city is still very high. However, the Russian Ministry of Defense may have discriminated against the Wagner troops by not providing them with the same number of shells as other units." When Sergei Surovikin was in command of the Russian invasion force in Ukraine, the situation was more favorable for Wagner, he added. Yusov told CNN that Wagner fighters lead most of the ground attacks around Bakhmut while the Russian military normally conducts airstrikes. He said there was internal competition within the Russian military, with different towers of the Kremlin supporting both sides. Wagner's commander-in-chief, Prigozhin, said in a Telegram post on Friday that his fighters would withdraw from Bakhmut within 5 days, having suffered heavy casualties in the battle for the city. He blamed the Russian Defense Ministry for not providing enough ammunition for the private military group and called on regular troops to take the positions of Wagner troops. Prigozhin has long complained that the Russian government has not provided enough ammunition for his fighters in their attempt to capture Bakhmut. This week, he posted a video laden with profanity on social media in which he pointed to the long line of bodies of Wagner warriors and continued to call for supplies. 6. Ukrainian military spokesman said Wagner's withdrawal from Bakhmut could be a turning point. During a press conference at the Kyiv Press Center on the morning of Saturday, May 6, Colonel Serhiy Cherevadii, a spokesman for the Eastern Ukraine Military Command, commented that Wagner's decision to withdraw troops from Bakhmut on the 10th was made. May 5 could be the turning point in the battle for the eastern Ukrainian city. If they don't change their logic and don't replenish their numbers, I think this could be seen as a turning point in the battle for Bakhmut. This Wagner was the key force that fought for Bakhmut. Colonel Serhiy Cherevadii said that for 9 months, they were exclusively there most of the time. Wagner's leader, Yevgeny Prigozhin, said in a Telegram post on Friday that his fighters would withdraw from Bakhmut within 5 days, having suffered heavy casualties in the battle for the city. He blamed the Russian Defense Ministry for not providing enough ammunition for the private military group. However, Cherevadii said that Wagner's incredible losses were due to their units acting foolishly, continuously attacking with human-sea tactics, and that Prigozhin wanted to leave to avoid being completely annihilated. All in the battle for the besieged city. If Wagner's losses continue to be as high as they are now, 100 or more men a day, and they don't find a way to replenish the personnel, Wagner will be destroyed in the Battle of Bakhmut, Cherevadii said. Added that the majority of the 137 Russian soldiers killed in fighting on the streets of Bakhmut in the past 24 hours were Wagner fighters. That's why Prigozhin wants to leave, or will try to leave, because if it continues like this, they will have problems in a few weeks, he said. Cherevati also claimed Prigozhin lied about his warriors' lack of ammunition. "There is no shortage of shells," he said. "In the last day alone, 520 rocket attacks were carried out on our positions in the Bakhmut area and there were 6 airstrikes, so this is not true." I think he was looking for an excuse to simply withdraw from the battlefield, after suffering huge losses, unable to perform any missions and unable to replenish his personnel. Wagner's mercenaries were at the forefront of the Russian attempt to capture Bakhmut. Cherevati said he expects the number of attacks against Ukrainian forces in Bakhmut to decrease if Wagner goes because regular Russian forces will not be able to waste personnel as Wagner did. Russian soldiers, whether they are paratroopers or special forces, are more timid than the Wagner troops. 7. Throughout their history, Russia and the Soviet Union have used fake flag operations. CNN has a commentary titled "How the Kremlin drone attack hands Russia an opportunity," which means the attack. How does a drone give the palace of Kremlin an opportunity? The drone attack on the Kremlin this week provided an opportunity for Moscow to rally Russians in favor of President Vladimir Putin against those who want to harm him. Ukrainian officials immediately warned the attacks could be exploited by Russia to launch even more sinister attacks on Ukrainians more than a year after Putin's forces carried out the attacks. Worst on Kyiv. Throughout its history, Russia, and the Soviet Union before it, has used false flag operations. Taiwan would like to open brackets to explain the term false flag operation. A false flag operation is an act performed with the aim of concealing the true source of responsibility and placing the blame on another party. To put it simply, it is to slap yourself in the face and then shout out false accusations to others. In 1999, just a few months before Putin was elected president for the first time, Russia was hit by a wave of apartment bombs that killed more than 300 people. Prime Minister Putin then cited the bombings to justify launching the Second Chechen War. His hard line won him the presidency, but suspicions remain about who was really behind the bombing. In the case of the alleged drone strikes, the Putin regime has spent the past year blaming Kyiv, NATO, and the United States for the war in Ukraine. Do they really need another excuse to try to kill Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky? That fact hasn't stopped former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev, now deputy chairman of Russia's National Security Council, from saying it's time to remove Zelensky. There is no choice but to get rid of Zelensky and his clique, Medvedev wrote on Twitter, where he regularly posts. He didn't even have to sign the unconditional surrender. Hitler, as you know, didn't sign it either. Medvedev ignored the fact that Russia tried and failed to remove Ukraine's president in the early stages of a full-scale invasion in February 2022. 8. Kyiv says Russia's major bosses are at the factory nuclear plant Zaporizhzhia trying to escape mass. Newsweek has an article titled "Zaporizhzhia Nuclear Plant Bosses Attempting to Flee en Masse," says Kyiv, which means Kyiv says Russia's big bosses at home nuclear machine Zaporizhzhia is trying to escape mass. According to Ukraine's nuclear operator, Russian-installed managers at the Moscow-invaded atomic power plant in Zaporizhzhia are trying to leave the site out of concern about an expected counterattack by Ukraine. Energodom said on Telegram that the Moscow-appointed site director, Yuri Chernychuk, left the town of Enerhodar, where the plant is located, for the invaded Crimea on Monday. The Ukrainian state-owned enterprise has also said that its rogue management has urgently applied for leave. The so-called current managers of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant expressed their desire to rest closer to the Kerch Strait, asking the Russians to let them go on vacation. The Kerch Strait separates Russia from the Russian-invaded Crimea. However, due to a severe shortage of personnel, the middle managers did not agree with this. The traders are trying to evacuate because they understand that the armed forces of Ukraine are approaching, so there is little time left to escape, the statement read. Energodom urges the brave workers of Zaporizhzhia station not to sign any contract with the enemy in the future, so as not to become a direct supporter of the aggressor and not to destroy their own future. Newsweek has reached out to Energodom for further comment. The danger of disaster has loomed over Europe's largest nuclear plant since it was seized by the Russian military shortly after a full-scale Russian invasion. In the months that followed, both sides accused the other of shelling the plant, located about 300 miles from the site of the 1986 Chernobyl nuclear disaster, raising concerns about what might happen if the damaged reactor. A handful of officials from the United Nations and nuclear watchdog, the International Atomic Energy Agency, or the IAEA for short, are at the site run by Ukrainian personnel working on orders of Russian forces and the Russian nuclear company Rosatom. Last week, British defense officials said Russian forces had built combat positions atop reactor buildings at the site as Moscow grew increasingly concerned about a predictable counteroffensive by Kyiv. However, they say that there is no possibility of direct serious damage to the reactors because the structures are so strongly protected. Also last week, Russia told the IAEA that equipment at the power plant would be used to repair power transmission lines leading to Russian-held territory. This raised concerns that Russia was preparing to connect the site to the power grid of territory already occupied by Moscow. Meanwhile, in the broader Zaporizhia region, authorities said on Wednesday that Russian forces had carried out 82 attacks in the previous 24 hours. Regional Governor Yuri Malashko reported that the Russians carried out 2 rocket attacks, 3 airstrikes, 4 drone strikes, and 69 artillery strikes. 9. Israel-designed missile detection system testing. An Israeli-designed missile detection system that gives Ukrainians more time to hide from Russian missile attacks is being tested in Kyiv and could be put into use within 2 months, Reuters quoted Ukraine's ambassador to Israel as saying. Israel, which has been honing its air defenses since it was attacked by a Scud missile in the 1991 Gulf War by Iraq, agreed to share technology with Ukraine last year, although it delayed. Delay in responding to Kyiv's requests for weapons. One of those requests was for the Iron Dome, a short-range interceptor system Israel uses to shoot down rockets fired by Palestinian militants in Gaza. Mindful of the government's efforts to maintain good relations with Moscow, Israeli officials did not provide details about the detection system being developed for the Ukrainians. Ambassador Yevgen Kornichuk said the system, which is provided with data from Ukrainian radars, is currently being tested in the capital Kyiv. He told Reuters. Iron Dome allows us to identify different objects, including ballistic missiles, and calculate where they will be aimed, and that essentially allows us to shut down certain areas of the country instead the whole country. Once completed, the system will warn people in areas that are about to be hit by Russian missiles or drones by sounding a siren nearby or with a mobile phone alert, he said. Speak. The system will allow for more precisely tailored notifications that will sound the alarm in each neighborhood that is at risk. It will allow us to close down Kyiv by region, Kornichuk said. Some residents will be notified by phone of when they have to jump into shelters, while in other parts of Kyiv people will be able to sit down and have a coffee. What I know from our experts is that they have already started work, and I expect that, according to our internal schedule, it will take another month or 2 for it to be operational in Kyiv. He added that 5 other cities are likely to follow suit. 10. Russian TV presenter compares plot to assassinate Putin to 9/11 attacks. Newsweek published an article titled Russian TV host compares Putin assassination attempt to 9/11 attacks, which means Russian TV presenter compares plot to assassinate Putin to 11-month-old attack 9. A prominent Russian state broadcaster on Wednesday compared the plot to assassinate Russian President Vladimir Putin to the September 11 attacks on New York City, according to a Russian propagandist. Vladimir Solovyov, one of the most popular figures in the Kremlin-backed media, made the comparison in his show aired on Russia 1. He and other experts on the show are discussing what the Kremlin says was an overnight drone strike orchestrated by Ukraine to assassinate Putin. Russia reported that air defenses had downed 2 drones aimed at its president, and the Kremlin later said the United States had a hand in planning the incident. However, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky denied his country was behind the alleged attack, and U.S. National Security spokesman John Kirby called claims that the U.S. was involved ridiculous. Julia Davis, the creator of Russian Media Monitor and columnist for the Daily Beast, said Solovyov was referring to the September 11, 2001 attacks by al-Qaeda terrorists on the mall. The world has claimed the lives of 2,977 victims. On his TV show, Solovyov showed an edited image of President Joe Biden and Zelensky walking in front of the burning Kremlin. He called the 2 leaders the organizers of the drone strike. The Russian host then showed a clip of U.S. State Department spokesman Vedant Patel discussing Ukraine's drone activities, in which Patel said Russia was aggressively invading and tried to erase another country's borders before saying that Russia would ultimately be responsible. Davis described the aggressive Solovyov as a ballistic missile in response to Patel's clip. I don't know who you can blame, that fat pig, but what I do know for sure is that you just justified September 11, the destruction of the Twin Towers, Solovyov said. We know the truth. Very simple, Nazi Ukraine tried to assassinate the supreme commander of our country, which has nuclear potential. Newsweek has reached out to the Russian Foreign Ministry by email for comment. Solovyov then issued a telegram post by Dmitry Medvedev, the former president of Russia and now vice chairman of Russia's Security Council. In his post, Medvedev wrote, "After today's terrorist attack, there is no choice but to get rid of Zelensky and his clique." According to Davis, Solovyov and his guests completely agreed with Medvedev's call to assassinate Zelensky. Asked about Solovyov's comments from Wednesday, Jason J. Smart, a political advisor on international and post-Soviet politics, told Newsweek that Solovyov is a professional propagandist, and I do my job very professionally. Like a lawyer who knows he is defending the guilty party, Solovyov's job is to present a counter-argument, Smart said. In Solovyov's case, I don't think he cares if he's lying or being dishonest. He added, but why did he do it? In fact, Russia may soon be planning a strategic attack on Kyiv, where it could target Ukrainian government officials. Russia is probably now laying the groundwork to justify its future actions in Ukraine as no worse than Ukraine's actions at the Kremlin. The U.S. State Department said Solovyov spread disinformation from the Kremlin and wrote on its website last year in a list identifying well-known figures involved in Russian propaganda that Solovyov possibly the most active propagandist of the Kremlin today. In recent weeks, Solovyov has made statements such as saying that Russia should launch a nuclear strike on any country that tries to detain Putin under an arrest warrant issued by the International Criminal Court in March for alleged war crimes. He has also repeatedly advocated for Moscow to use its nuclear capabilities against pro-Ukrainian nations.